Good afternoon, and welcome to the ITAP Future of Manufacturing Summit. My name is Dennis Ling. I'm a Group Director at the A-Star Enterprise Division, and I'll be the moderator for this session. Today, we'll be talking about overcoming barriers to transformation in manufacturing. How can I 4.0 be more accessible to business? I think this is a very interesting topic. I 4.0 is no longer a new phenomenon. Manufacturing firms around the world have embraced some form of I 4.0 in their operations. And according to a recent McKinsey survey of manufacturers in Asia, about 39% of respondents have implemented a control tower approach to increase end-to-end supply chain transparency, while 25% are in fact fast-tracking automation initiatives to make up for worker shortages arising from COVID-19. So while there's evidence that COVID-19 has certainly accelerated the adoption of I 4.0 concepts and technologies, we will explore in this panel some of the barriers or challenges that some companies still face in embracing I 4.0 and how I 4.0 can be made more accessible. So to discuss this topic with four esteemed panelists, we have Ms. Joyce Xiao, Group Executive Director, Watson EP Industries, Mr. Jackie Tan, World Economic Forum Fellow and VP of Industry 4.0 Consultancy at Tufsuit Asia Pacific Private Limited, Ms. Cecilia Koo, General Manager at Delta Electronics International, and Mr. Tobias Botenhart, VP and Head of Business Unit Process Automation ASEAN and Software for Process Industries APAC at Siemens. Thank you and welcome. So to start off, we will have each of our panelists share about their respective experiences embracing I 4.0 at their respective companies, either within or externally, and then we'll launch into discussion thereafter. So first up, may I invite Joyce Xiao, the Group Executive Director at Watson EP Industries, to share. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Hi, I'm Joyce. I'm a second generation leader in Watson. It's a family business established over 40 years ago. We are contract manufacturers and we manufacture consumer electronic products and industrial products such as hardware tracking devices, soap dispensers to audio loudspeakers. We help our customers ranging from global companies to small startups design, engineer, and manufacture their products in our Singapore and China plants. So why China? Because we think China is one of the world's leaders in technology and we want to be in the heart of action and be kept abreast of the technology there. Our engineering team comes from China, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, and Latvia, which is Eastern Europe. Our product development cycle, as you can see from my slide, starts from mechanical design, electronics, PCB design. Our engineers would then 3D print prototypes to test their design. After the design is firm, we will use engineering software to do metal tool designs, conduct mold flow simulation, product assembly drawings, and the revisions. It usually takes a few iterations to get the optimal design for manufacturability. After the product is manufactured, we conduct quality and dimension checks. This cycle takes minimally 3 to 6 months. Our manufacturing services includes plastic injection tool fabrication, plastic injection molding, plating on plastic, spray painting, PCBA assembly, and the entire product assembly. The loudspeaker photo shown in the bottom corner of my slide is one of the products that we make. Next slide, please. So for engineering works, we use engineering software such as SolidWorks for CAD design and a separate product data management software. Currently, my engineer draws in SolidWorks, sends the drawing files and FOM, which is the list of product details, to another engineering team in charge of electronic PDM software to keep track of all the latest drawings and revisions. The product details are then sent to our planners to create part numbers and input the part details in our ERP system, prepare for production planning, and to purchase the raw materials required. So in the other quadrant, you'll see our business operations or sales, accounts, purchase, inventory. We have ERP system, a CRM system, and of course, HR, payroll, and leave software. For production, we have factory track software with scanners to capture production data. But currently, only our ERP, CRM, and factory track are linked. So ideally, We want to have all the different software integrated. Our current engineering software are not linked to our ERP, and some form of customizations like writing APIs will be necessary to link this software together. So I spoke to a digital solutions provider recently and learned that something we can look forward to is new platforms are being developed to seamlessly integrate all PBM, ERP, and MES software in one dashboard. So that really improves efficiency to reduce data transfer, translation efforts, and conversion errors without need for customizations. So typically, each of these engineering software is quite costly and requires upfront payment. So once we purchase the software, we tend to use it for a few years. A unified platform for specialized software that is subscription-based model, where we can pick the software that we need only for the period that we need. So example, MoFlow software, I may need it only for 3 months, and I do not need to continue pay and use it for the next 3 years. So it's exciting because that means no bulk payment upfront. And it also means the cost of adoption to use this specialized software is lower, and it offers the flexibility of changing different software when we wish to. Currently, we're in the process of evaluation for sensors to be installed in our machines and a visual inspection system with AI to detect defects in production. But it is not without challenges. The challenge is for visual inspection systems, we need a lot of photos to form a good enough database for accuracy and for the algorithm to learn. A minimum of 100 photo images is required for each defect, and we have to check multiple defects like scratches, dents, seam marks, flow marks, uneven shine, etc. So each part easily requires about 600 to 800 images of different defects to input into the database. So a long preparation time is needed to gather these physical defects and input into the system for the machine learning to capture the defects with accuracy. However, these are solutions that we are evaluating due to aging workforce, so we can complement human inspectors to use such visual inspection tools to help them with product quality inspection. Next slide, please. So last year, we embarked on the IHCI Enabler 6 weeks program for my team to learn from McKinsey and EY consultants on both the technical aspects and the human resource development needs for the IE 4.0 industry for the journey. It's a flagship program from SPF and Workforce Singapore and offered at a highly subsidized rate for eligible SMEs. I'll strongly recommend it for those who want a hands-on experience on IE 4.0. I picked process quality optimization as the problem statement to work on. The slides you see here details some of the data collection process we had done in order to generate meaningful analysis to identify possible root cause of the process defects. We need to have every production jig identified. Input the production start and end time for each jig into analytics software to these parts from each jig has to be inspected individually and recorded to track the type of defects and the rate of defects. Operational parameters like temperature, chemical concentration, and pH of the chemical baths are also tracked and recorded in the analytics software. Well, the end result is good as it identifies successfully the causes to the defects, and with that, we improved our yield. Next slide, please. However, the challenge we faced is the process of various manual data collection required for the data analytics software is tedious. And as the data analytics software is not linked to our ERP system, 2 sets of data entry have to be captured in 2 different systems. So that doubles the time our inspectors need for data entry. So although the recommendation made was to upgrade to AutoLine and install sensors for more effective data collection, we couldn't proceed with this due to 2 reasons. One is a high investment cost, and the other is because the AutoLine supply is overseas. So with all the travel restrictions from the pandemic situation, it makes it difficult for us to work with the overseas supplier on this upgrade project for the time being. But what is the good outcome that we face, that we learned? So through IHCI, my team has learned a lot about IE 4.0 together with McKinsey team. McKinsey team do not have the domain knowledge in plating, but the results of the data analytics is helpful for us on the technical level. So this really opened up my team's mind on the power of the data analytics. So being an alumni of the IHCI programs, it also connects us to the new solutions providers who recently joined the IHCI network. And this is actually how I got connected to the visual inspection systems solution provider, which I mentioned earlier. So in summary, it's a continuous journey for us to search the market for the right digitalization solution. And it's imperative that we inquire and learn about new solutions so we can implement suitable solutions over time to be future ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I think that's been a very interesting journey, and we can talk about it a bit more later. Next, we will have Mr. Jackie Tan to share. Over to you, Jackie.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you're dialing from. In my slide today, I just want to share with everyone our observations on Industry 4.0 adoption rates globally and what companies can really use to start your transformation journey. Next slide, please. Now, based on our survey, our research, and our insight study recently, we do see that companies are involved in two different challenges. Of course, there are business challenges and there are manufacturing challenges. From a business perspective, we do see that companies are now being asked to reduce or even shortened product life cycle of your product, or is part of introducing new product, or even reduce the whole life cycle of product timelines. There's also emerging competitions, from non-traditional, let's say, competitors, and business have to really adapt to that. And how can they be more agile and adaptive to new requirements? All in all, we do see that there's more and more, let's say, requirements coming in from customers, from suppliers, and this is really what business have to deal with today, especially also in supply chain management. Now, if you look into manufacturing challenges, we do see that companies exhibit few different, let's say, manufacturing challenges, such as legacy systems, inventory costs, supply chain management, or even workforce upskilling, and even workforce retentions. And this really, let's say, hinders the whole operation management of a factory environment. And this is where we see right now companies really have to adopt Industry 4.0, not just doing pilot implementations, but really about scaling it towards multiple factories within the right, let's say, framework and time. Next slide, please. Now, based on our research as well, we do see that 41% of business today are really struggling to identify where and how can they start their transformation journey. They understand the situations, they understand the complication behind, what could Industry 4.0 bring to the companies, what are the potential of Industry 4.0, but it's really about resolutions, what could companies implement, what could companies, let's say, perform better in terms of identifying the right solutions for scaling purposes. Now, for us, what we've seen so far is really, these are all the questions that you have seen here. Where am I today? Where are my competitors today? What are the business drivers? Where are the potential return investments? And which area should I focus on? Am I equipped with the right people, process, or even technology to really kickstart my transformation journey? And these questions remains today in many organizations. Next slide, please. Now, how we see that Industry 4.0 transformation, we do see that coming in a very structured approach, starting with Industry 4.0 maturity assessment. We do see that companies really starting with this area to understand where they are today, identify key areas for improvement, and potentially even benchmark with their competitors and peers, because that's where, knowing where you are today, you know where you can head to in the next steps. And very often we do see companies miss out in this area. And we do recommend starting with your maturity assessment to understand where you are today. Once company has done the assessment, understanding where they are today, where are the potential areas to focus on, that's where they really go into a holistic roadmap design to redesign what could be the future of their factory, or we can go with factory of the future. At the same time, perform certain pilot implementations, what we call proof of concept. It's quite essential for companies to come up with a strategy for their Industry 4.0 roadmap. And not just, a tactical approach or operational needs. It's really about what it means for companies in terms of Industry 4.0. And we do recommend that really coming from a structured approach in designing the roadmap and coupling with the right pilot implementations. Once they have successfully completed the roadmap designs and perform a level of pilot implementations, that's where companies start to really scale and really do a full stream Industry 4.0 implementations, partnering with vendors, partnering with solution providers, system integrators to really multiply the effect. Because at the end of the day, companies doesn't need to just be more productive, higher quality. It's also need to be more customer-centric operations as a whole. At the same time, to increase your agility and speed. And very often we do see companies miss out this area. How can we be closer to customers? How can we be agile at the same time? Having the right speed from operations to supply chain management. And we do see this approach is a more, let's say, holistic and robust approach companies can really adopt. Of course, don't forget there's an element of training and upskilling that companies has to be constantly be aware of, because with every new solution introduced, don't forget your workforce need to be upskilled and trained at the same time. Next slide, please. With this, I just want to share with everyone one of the initiatives that we have brought out together with the World Economic Forum, which is the Global Smart Industry Readiness Index Initiative. It's a framework that we designed together with Singapore Economic Development Board, with partners, and now being endorsed by the World Economic Forum to help companies to restart their Industry 4.0 transformation journey. This project is actually performed by what we call Certified CV Assessor, and companies will benefit in 3 areas. Number 1, an assessment metrics results whereby companies get to understand where they are today in terms of their whole operations, ranging from factory, supply chain, and even their product lifecycle management. Second point, which is on the prioritization metrics recommendations, company will really understand where they are today and where are the focus area that will bring them the biggest value for the business transformations. And third point is really companies will get to experience benchmarking, such that they can compare themselves to the peers and listening where they are, or how big is the gaps, or how far ahead they are. And typically, we do see that once a company completed this assessment in 2 days, they will have a good sense, a good awareness where they can start, which area they can work on, and that will really mobilize the whole organization in adopting Industry 4.0. Of course, today we do see that there's more than 300 companies has benefited from this project, and we do see that this is really a useful tool for you, for companies to really start, scale, and really sustain the transformation journey. With that, I'll come to my last slide. Of course, we too are happy to partner with you to help you in terms of your Industry 4.0 transformation journey, and we wish you, let's say, a successful transformation as well. Thank you. Back to you, Dennis.
Thank you, Jackie. I think that's a very interesting approach, and I think we can talk a little bit more about the structured approach that companies can take later on. Right, right now we will have Ms. Cecilia Khoo from Delta to share. Thank you. Over to you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Dennis. So my first slide, let me introduce Delta Electronics a bit. Delta Electronics is a public listed company in Taiwan, and we focus on 3 segments: power electronics, automation, and infrastructure. So we have 39 manufacturing and assembly plants in the world. So when we started our I4.0 journey, it was more than 10 years ago. And because every single production line is active production lines, and we have orders to fulfill every day. So at the beginning, when we started out, if we go from the left-hand side, we actually look at every single products and every single components that we manufactured, and we try to simplify them and standardize them. So then we have a bigger common grounds for scale. And later, then we look at all of our equipments, whether we can upgrade them to smart equipment. Once we can upgrade them to smart equipment or replace them with a smarter devices, so then we can get data out of them, then we move on to the digitalization phase. So digitalization, we can actually pull production planning, real-time production planning, and manufacturing execution. And once we digitalize all of that, we have data, then we can do data analytics and real-time monitoring and energy management. So then we can fulfill all of this in the middle, where we normally call it a smart factory should have a real-time production, scheduling, preventative maintenance, and recipe management and all that. And this actually helps us when we face the China-US trade war, and we have to move production line very quickly to other countries and set it up and reassemble. So then we can fulfill the orders that we have to fulfill every day from other factories in different locations. Next slide, please. So this slides actually just show, how do we actually digitalize everything that we have. So starting from ERP, MRP, MES, WMS, and logistics software. So we integrate them together and made them all IoT based. So then all of the data will be on cloud, and we have a big data platform. So once we have every single data on one platform, it is easier for us to extract data and do data analytics. So can we move to the next slide, please? So this one is very interesting. I just hear from Joyce as well. Once we have data, we can pull all of the data from every single machine and every single like chiller, whatever machine that actually utilize or consume most energy. So then we can make it more energy efficient. And also, once we have data, we can actually analyze human brains. We can probably do 3-dimensional, parameters analysis on quality controls. But with AI, with data and effective data, useful data, then we can actually do like 16-dimensional parameters, analyze them together, and then we can work out a better quality materials or semi-finished products with our suppliers and help our suppliers to improve their quality. So once we help our suppliers to have better quality raw materials, when they come to Delta, then Delta's products, finished products, has a better stability as well for our end customers. So next slide, please. So this is just the new Delta 5G production line upgrades, because we hear about, a lot of SMEs, they complaining, when we talk to them, they say, Cecilia, all of our production lines are very busy. How can we have downtime? And if we were to replace everything, it would be very costly. So our example is we actually pick production line by production line, and then you review whatever product or components first. Once you have the components, then you have a bit of scale. Then, you can do the automation, digitalization first. And because of COVID, we actually have a lot of engineers who cannot travel and do whatever support. And we also need to, relocate our factories to different locations in the world, right? So then we work with Microsoft. We also work with Far Eastern telecommunication companies in Taiwan. So we built the 5G production line upgrades. So then we have AR, we have VR, we have mixed reality to facilitate, if we look at the left-hand side, you will see the AR actually facilitating, the engineer on the ground to look at all the status and the working conditions of every single machine. And you can also actually, because it's all IoT based, with the smart lens, then they can actually take out materials and use the lens to do an automatic checkout straight away without any human intervention. In the middle, because of COVID, our engineers cannot travel anywhere, so we actually use the virtual realities to help us train all of the engineers on the ground who actually have to assemble the machines together, who has to learn the new assembly process. And we also install the 360 camera. They can high resolution camera. They can actually analyze, and of course with the AI algorithm. So then you can actually analyze the person on the ground doing the assembly behaviors and whether they did it right or did it wrong, and they will send a report to the assembly workers about what the products they actually assemble. On the very right-hand side, then you can see a mixed reality where we have to implement, install the machine on the ground, and the engineer who cannot travel can actually use the mixed reality and work together with the engineer on the ground on a totally different location and guide them on how they can actually assemble or fix or do the repairments at different locations. So this is several technologies that Delta actually implemented within our factory, just to because of COVID, to address some of the challenges that we face within our factories. Back to you, Dennis.
Thank you, Cecilia. And last but not least, we had Tobias from Siemens. Over to you, Tobias.
Thank you, Dennis, and also good day from my side. Yeah, so I work with Siemens, taking care of the process automation business in ASEAN, as well as the digital solutions, the software portfolio basically for our process industries customers in the broader APAC region. If you could move to the next slide. So if we talk about Industry 4.0, really it is about bringing together the real world as well as the digital world. So the concept of a digital twin that you may have heard of, and this may apply to a single asset or like a certain process within your plant, or it may even comprise the entire plant or multiple plants, even if you talk about a multi-site scenario. And from a Siemens perspective, we work with our customers, but you probably also know that we ourselves are operating a large fleet of manufacturing sites around the world. So many of the aspects that I'm going to share, we have also gone through from our end. We are also in a learning process, and we are also, of course, trying to make use of the experiences that we have gathered whenever we work together with our customers to help them embarking on their digital transformation journey. If you could move on. From a technology perspective, there's certain components that we are offering to our customers, and Siemens is probably one of the vendors who has one of the most comprehensive portfolios, we could say, helping customers covering all the different aspects that you need to consider when you try to develop a digital twin of your production environment. So this comprises automation and instrumentation as well as communication technologies. It is also about software solutions pertaining to engineering, maintenance, the way how you operate your plants. And another very important area and becoming also increasingly relevant to our customers is the whole complex of simulation and modeling, which helps customers already when they plan a plant or during the R&D stage of product development to simulate, to optimize, but also throughout the operations, basically on the fly, trying to identify additional potential for optimization. If you could move on. So that's the technology view. But then what we can also see is that many of the transformation projects, they may fail or perhaps not reach the full degree of the targets that have been set at the beginning when whatever kind of digital project was initiated. And in many cases, it is not so much about the technology, what we have realized, but it's other underlying components and factors that also need to be kept in mind whenever you think about really embarking on this kind of initiative. If you could move on. So what we have identified is those 5 main building blocks that you see here on the slide, which are really sort of like the foundation or prerequisite that need to be addressed in the context of technology transformation projects, right? So it is also about trying to change the mindset of your people, the culture of your organization. It is certainly about acquiring competencies. Yeah, you need to be able to attract also digital talent into your organization. It's also about learning how to work cross-department, cross-functionalities, which maybe in the old days was not that common, right? There was maybe more a silo thinking in place, which the introduction of digital technologies is certainly removing or decreasing. It is about speed, yeah. So companies also need to adapt to a more agile approach to the way how they do business, but also how they run projects, yeah. And because in many areas these technologies are still evolving, so and there's also a need for having a certain flexibility along the journey to make necessary amendments when you really implement these solutions. You could go on, next slide. So to make it a bit more concise, and in order to get started, and this applies really to companies of different sizes, no matter whether they are large MNCs or SMEs. In our experience, it is good to start small and focused, understand where you are. Yeah, we heard earlier that there's certain procedures such as Siri in place. So also Siemens is offering with our Siri assessors support to customers to baseline where they are today, and also to understand where are the gaps that need to be addressed. It's helpful to have a small task force to really focus on these initiatives. And we would also recommend to go with an experienced partner, because in the end, nobody will have all the necessary knowledge within their organization. Yeah, so definitely look outside of your own organization and see who are the partners that could possibly help you and stay with you throughout the process. Yeah, think big. So you really also need to address aspects such as the overall corporate strategy, the business processes, organizational setup, and of course also the required budgets to have them in place, so that you can really go through the extension and expansion also of the deployment. And I mentioned earlier, it's also about scaling, about agility. Yeah, so we do recommend to really also make use of mature enterprise solutions, off the shelf ideally, rather than maybe trying to develop own software applications. There's good stuff out there in the market, which I believe has proven in terms of functionality and also scalability. So that's another important aspect to be considered. And yeah, if I could move on to the next slide, just closing off with like one example how really this digital twin would look like in reality. We have been working with Chandra Asri Petrochemicals in Indonesia, for example, helping them to build a digital asset information management system. So they really were coming from a very analog environment in terms of like documentation of their plant, of their assets, of their processes. And we have together with them embarked on a long-term project. Yeah, so here we are really looking at a time span of like 5 years. With different stages that have been defined. They have also put in place a dedicated team to drive this initiative. And in the end, this solution will really help them to have better transparency, operate their assets more efficiently, avoid downtimes, reduce maintenance costs, and in the end, yeah, enlarge or improve the productivity of the plant. So with this, I would like to close off, and I'm happy to hear from you, and you are welcome to contact me for any further questions or inquiries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tobias. Yes, so I think that's been very interesting, and there's been a lot of material that's been covered. I think it talks about certain barriers that each of you have faced or with your customers. So I think just quickly to talk on one of the things that I've read a lot it seems that also comes through that one of the challenges mainly or barriers is around the area of cost and talent. Do you think that is really one of the main common areas that people talk about, when wanting to embrace I 4.0? And what do you think are the practical steps that they can take to overcome it? Maybe I can start with you, Jackie, from your experience with the customers.
Sure, thanks, Dennis. So I think absolutely cost and talent is always questions within many manufacturing perspective. I think number one, let's look into cost. Very often when companies wanted to implement Industry 4.0 solutions, the first thing they ask, do I know the ROI? Do I know the return on investments, right? Should I go with vendors? Which vendor should I go into? And ultimately, what we say to many manufacturing companies is really understanding what is your roadmap, understanding the business case behind the roadmap. Because at the end of the day, when you present your solutions or you recommend your solutions to your senior management team, you've got to present a strong, solid business case. And that's something that we always see companies lacking of the right talent to come up with the right business case as well. So that links to talent, right? So cost is one aspect to implement solutions. But how could we groom the right talents or upskill the right talents to really be able to communicate, identify, and enable solutions implementations? I think that's the second part that I think many companies are also looking at. I think ASAP, for instance, are having several programs really to train workforces to be able to design roadmap, to be able to, let's say, calculate financial benefits of solutions, and at the same time validate the implementation approach using pilot approach as well. So I think that's really very useful from an ASAP perspective. And I do personally recommend that, in order to convince senior management team about cost, we got to have a strong business case to support your decision making. And
thank you, Jackie. Yeah. So on that, I think it's also will be interesting to hear from you, Joyce. How, from your perspective as SME, you overcome the two problems that we talked about, cost and talent. And you also mentioned that a lot of things that you do requires a lot of capex.
Yes, Dennis. So first, we are still very far away from the ideal model factory that Delta Electronics have, and also what Siemens Tobias has presented. That being a typical SME with limited budget, we have to do a gradual transformation over time. But the thing is, we cannot give up. We must keep going and search for solutions out there, as I mentioned earlier, because it's about a continuous journey. If I don't have the necessary budget for the solution now, it doesn't mean that I will not have it and not implement it in the future. But it's also about flexibility. I think Tobias has mentioned it. We need to be flexible, adapt to what the solutions are available out there. So sometimes, perhaps 2 years ago, if it's not available now, that could be more viable. It's a lower cost of adoption with economies of scale of manufacturing. So I'm looking forward to better automation solutions that I can adopt to help the factory become more I 4.0 ready.
Good, thank you. And Tobias, you mentioned last slide, where you gave an interesting example. How do you think governments can come in? What is their role here in encouraging adoption of I 4.0?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a very important component as well, right? And in our experience, it already starts on the educational side, right? That of course the talent needs to be somehow built and developed, right? So it is very important that governments are really setting the right focus in the education at a very early stage already, or at a later stage, like what we can see in also Singapore. I think it is done very actively that you also try to reskill a certain part of your workforce, in order to make them able to find a way back maybe into the work life, or to stay relevant. So I think that's one area where certainly governments are coming into the play, right? The educational piece. And then of course another area is in terms of also creating incentives for companies to introduce digital technologies, right? Be it with certain support programs, or be it with setting up competence centers, hubs, basically building the knowledge, and another area could be also in terms of maybe having certain tax incentives to really drive this forward. Because in the end, I think it is very much also in the interest of the public sector or the governments themselves. Yeah, we can see that apart from Singapore and Malaysia, the other neighboring ASEAN countries, they are rather low in terms of the manufacturing productivity rates, right? So meaning in order to really become competitive, if you look at, for example, China, the countries, they really need to push forward in increasing these productivity rates. And here, I think automation, but especially digitalization, is an extremely important driver. And then this is something which basically helps the countries and their industries and GDPs then also to further grow and become more competitive from a regional perspective.
Thank you. I think that's an interesting perspective to share. And Cecilia, from your experience working with so many customers, of various sizes, what is it that you usually would, advise them to do if they were to ask you how do they get onto the I 4.0 ladder?
For a smaller company, we normally will ask them to nominate some, the change agents. So they love to do new things. They have big pictures and they're willing to work hard and willing to do overtime all the time and understand the whole processes. And for the medium-sized companies, of course, they can play around with different new technologies. And of course, the incentive, like Tobias were talking about, is very important. And some of the guidance, like series and all that, and from so all of them have to all work together. So the medium size, they can actually have a bit freedom to play around with new technologies and all that. And big companies, large enterprise, I think we also need to chip into the whole environment. So then we create like something like a think tank. And then the smaller companies, the medium-sized company can all learn experiences from the the bigger size MNCs or LLE. So then we can actually help Singapore move faster. That's my view and determinations.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm quite disappointed that we have run out of time. We really have a lot more that we can talk about. And I think the panel really have, given us all a good view of what some of the initiatives that each taken, and also the frameworks that are in place. I think there's not a lack of technology, or there's not a lack of, incentives out there, even from the government side to help. So I think it's all about working together as an ecosystem, learning from one another, like on this type of platforms like ITAP. And I think, there's so much more that we can do to speed up transformation I 4.0. And I look forward, to working with everyone in this regard. So thank you very much to the panelists for your sharing. And I wish all the audience a very good day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.